So you think you can spot a dangerous person from a mile away, right? You probably imagine sociopaths as the creepy guy in a horror movie, lurking in shadows with dead eyes and a collection of questionable hobbies. Well, congratulations, you've just fallen for one of psychology's most persistent myths. The reality is far more unsettling, because actual sociopaths are often the most charming, successful and likable people you'll ever meet. They're not hiding in basements, they're running your favourite restaurant, dating your best friend, or quite possibly managing your retirement fund. Here's the thing that'll keep you up at night: sociopathy isn't about being obviously evil or visibly unhinged. It's about having a brain that processes emotions and relationships like a computer processes data, completely functional but utterly devoid of the messy human feelings that make the rest of us occasionally decent people. Think of it as emotional colour blindness, except instead of not seeing red and green, they can't see guilt, empathy, or genuine remorse. The term sociopathy falls under what psychologists now call antisocial personality disorder, and it affects roughly 1 to 4% of the population. That means in any group of 100 people, at least one person is walking around with the emotional depth of a puddle, yet somehow managing to convince everyone else that they're absolutely delightful company. Before we dive into this psychological rabbit hole, drop a comment and let me know what other aspects of human psychology you think need explaining. I'm always looking for new topics to explore, and don't forget to like and subscribe because apparently even semi-professional psychologists need validation, and mine comes in the form of tiny digital hearts. Let's get the technical stuff out of the way first, because understanding sociopathy requires knowing what we're actually dealing with. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, psychology's equivalent of a recipe book for human dysfunction, classifies this under antisocial personality disorder. The key researcher who really put this on the map was Hervey Cleckley, back in 1941 with his book The Mask of Sanity, which sounds like a horror novel, but is actually a chillingly accurate description of how these individuals present themselves. Cleckley identified what he called the mask of sanity, the idea that sociopaths appear completely normal, even exceptionally appealing on the surface. They're not the obvious villains, they're the people who seem too good to be true because guess what? They usually are. Robert Hare later developed the psychopathy checklist, which became the gold standard for identifying these individuals. Now, you might be wondering about the difference between sociopathy and psychopathy, and honestly, it's like asking about the difference between being stabbed with a knife versus a sword. The end result is still pretty unpleasant for everyone involved. The fascinating and terrifying thing about sociopaths is that they're not technically insane. Their thinking is crystal clear, their logic is often impeccable, and their ability to read social situations can be absolutely brilliant. It's like having a master chess player who's decided that all the other pieces on the board aren't real people with feelings, just obstacles to be moved or removed as needed. Studies using brain imaging have shown that sociopaths have reduced activity in areas associated with empathy and moral reasoning, particularly the prefrontal cortex and amygdala. It's as if nature decided to create humans with all the intelligence and charm, but forgot to install the software update that makes you care about other people's suffering. So how do you actually recognize a sociopath? Well, here's where it gets tricky, because they're essentially human chameleons who've perfected the art of being exactly what you want them to be. But there are patterns, and once you know what to look for, it's like seeing the Matrix code. First, there's the superficial charm. Sociopaths are often incredibly charismatic, the kind of people who light up a room and make everyone feel like they're the most interesting person in the world. They're smooth talkers who always seem to know exactly what to say. It's like they've studied human interaction the way most people study for a driving test. They know all the right moves, but they're just going through the motions. Then there's the grandiose sense of self-worth. These individuals genuinely believe they're superior to everyone else, not in an obnoxious, obvious way, but in a quiet, unshakable confidence that rules don't really apply to them. They'll break promises, bend ethics, and manipulate situations while maintaining this serene belief that they're completely justified in doing so. Here's something that might surprise you. Sociopaths are pathological liars, but not in the way you'd expect. They don't just lie to get out of trouble, they lie for the sheer sport of it. They'll fabricate elaborate stories about their past, their achievements, or their connections, not because they have to, but because they can. It's like they're constantly beta testing different versions of reality to see which one gets the best response. Another red flag is their complete lack of genuine remorse. Sure, they'll apologize when caught, and they might even seem convincingly sorry, but watch carefully. Their apologies are always strategic, designed to minimize consequences rather than express genuine regret. It's the emotional equivalent of a software-generated response, technically correct but completely hollow. You might ask yourself why someone would behave this way, and the answer is both simple and disturbing, because they can. Without the internal emotional guardrails that stop most of us from being terrible, they operate purely on a cost-benefit analysis of their actions. Now let's talk about how sociopaths actually operate in the wild, because understanding their methods is like learning to spot a magician's tricks. Once you know how it's done, the illusion loses its power. Sociopaths are masters of what psychologists call impression management. They study people the way scientists study lab rats, carefully observing what makes you tick, what your vulnerabilities are, and exactly how to push your buttons to get what they want. They're like emotional pickpockets, so skilled you don't realize you've been robbed until much later. One of their favorite techniques is something called love bombing. They'll shower you with attention, compliments, and affection at the beginning of a relationship, making you feel like you've found your soulmate. It's intoxicating and addictive, which is exactly the point. Once you're hooked, they gradually dial back the attention, leaving you constantly trying to recapture that initial high. It's psychological manipulation disguised as romance. They're also experts at gaslighting, making you question your own perception of reality. They'll deny things they clearly said, rewrite history to make themselves look better, or convince you that your perfectly reasonable reactions are actually signs that you're being irrational. It's like having someone constantly move your furniture 2 inches to the left, and then insist you're imagining things when you keep bumping into it. Here's where it gets even more disturbing. Sociopaths often target empathetic, caring people, because these individuals are more likely to make excuses for bad behavior and less likely to set firm boundaries. They can spot a people-pleaser from across a crowded room and zero in like a heat-seeking missile. Research by Dr. Martha Stout suggests that sociopaths are particularly drawn to positions of power and authority, not because they want to help others, but because these roles give them access to more people to manipulate and more opportunities to bend rules without consequences. They're like emotional vampires who figured out that the blood bank is a much more efficient hunting ground than wandering around looking for individual victims. You might think sociopaths are rare, but statistics suggest they're actually quite common in certain professions. Studies have found higher concentrations of individuals with psychopathic traits in fields like law, business, surgery, and politics. Basically, any career that rewards ruthless decision-making and emotional detachment is like a sociopath magnet. In the workplace, sociopaths are often the colleagues who seem impossibly successful, despite leaving a trail of burned bridges and destroyed relationships in their wake. They're the ones who take credit for other people's work, throw teammates under the bus without hesitation, and somehow always manage to come out looking like the hero when everything falls apart. They excel at what researchers call corporate psychopathy, using their charm and manipulation skills to climb the ladder while leaving chaos behind them. They're like emotional tornadoes in expensive suits, leaving devastation in their path while maintaining a perfect LinkedIn profile. One particularly chilling aspect is their ability to mimic emotions they don't actually feel. They've learned to produce the right facial expressions, vocal tones, and body language to appear empathetic, but it's all performance. It's like watching a really good actor play a caring person, technically perfect but somehow fundamentally hollow. Here's something that might blow your mind. Some researchers suggest that certain sociopathic traits might have actually been evolutionarily advantageous in small doses. The ability to make tough decisions without being paralyzed by emotional considerations, the confidence to take risks, and the charisma to lead others could have been beneficial for survival in harsh environments. It's just that in modern society, these traits without the balancing influence of empathy and conscience become destructive rather than adaptive. The most unsettling part is that sociopaths often genuinely don't understand why other people get so upset about their behavior. To them, emotions are just tools to be manipulated, and relationships are just resources to be exploited. They're not evil in the traditional sense, they're just operating with a completely different moral operating system, one that doesn't include other people as real, feeling entities deserving of consideration. So now that I've thoroughly terrified you about the charming monsters walking among us, let's talk about protection, because knowledge really is your best defense against these emotional predators. The key is learning to trust your gut feelings over your rational mind. If someone seems too good to be true, if their stories don't quite add up, or if you find yourself constantly making excuses for their behavior, pay attention to those red flags. Your subconscious often picks up on inconsistencies that your conscious mind tries to rationalize away. Watch for the pattern of idealization followed by devaluation. Sociopaths typically put you on a pedestal initially, then gradually tear you down once they've secured your attachment. If someone's treatment of you seems to follow this trajectory, especially if they blame you for the change, that's a massive warning sign. Also, observe how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Sociopaths are usually charming to people they need something from, but dismissive or cruel to those they consider beneath them. Watch how they interact with service workers, subordinates, or anyone who doesn't have power or usefulness in their world. Set and maintain firm boundaries, even when it feels uncomfortable. Sociopaths are like emotional boundary testers, constantly pushing to see how much they can get away with. If someone consistently ignores your boundaries or makes you feel guilty for having them, that's not someone you want in your life. Remember that you can't fix, change, or love a sociopath into becoming empathetic. That's not how personality disorders work, and trying to do so will only drain your energy and damage your own mental health. It's like trying to teach a colorblind person to see red by showing them more red objects. The fundamental wiring just isn't there. The most important thing to understand is that recognizing sociopathic behavior isn't about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everyone you meet. Most people are decent, flawed, complicated humans trying their best. But knowing what to look for helps you identify the small percentage who are playing by completely different rules, so you can protect yourself accordingly. So there you have it, your crash course in spotting the charming predators among us. Sweet dreams, and remember, if someone seems absolutely perfect and makes you feel like you're living in a fairy tale, you might want to check if you're actually in a psychological thriller instead. Don't forget to subscribe for more delightfully disturbing insights into why human psychology is both fascinating and absolutely terrifying, because apparently I've made a career out of explaining why we can't trust our own species.